I sat in the boardroom, the city skyline stretching out beyond the glass windows, a sea of steel and concrete that symbolized everything I had built. The ink was still drying on the contract in front of me, a monumental deal, the kind that solidified legacies. Across the table, Olivier, my business partner and closest friend, leaned back in his chair, a satisfied smirk playing at his lips. We had won together. Or so I thought. That morning, a shadow had followed me into the office. Isabelle, my wife, had been distant for months. At first, I ignored the late nights, the vague excuses, the fleeting, almost guilty glances when I asked where she had been. Love makes fools of us all, and I was no exception. I trusted her implicitly, convinced myself that we were simply going through a rough patch. After all, we had built a life together, a partnership forged in love and ambition. She was my anchor, my constant. But trust is a fragile thing. And in a matter of seconds, mine would be shattered. Olivier's phone vibrated against the polished glass table, breaking the rhythm of our conversation. Without hesitation, he picked it up, his expression lighting up in a way that made my stomach tighten. Then, in a voice dripping with easy familiarity, he said the name that sent ice through my veins. Isabelle, he greeted warmly as though welcoming a lover. Hey, glad you called. Last night was incredible. How about dinner at 6:30? I'll make the reservation at that place you like. The world around me went silent. My breath hitched. My pulse pounded so loudly I could barely hear the rest of his words. But I didn't need to. I had heard enough. The casual ease in his voice, the way he leaned back in his chair as if discussing weekend plans, it was all so normal. But it wasn't. It was a confession, spoken in broad daylight right in front of me. The woman I had devoted my life to, the one who once promised forever, had been lying in my best friend's arms. Olivier ended the call with a smirk, setting his phone down as if nothing had happened. Then, as if to twist the knife, he turned to me, his tone so maddeningly nonchalant it made my blood boil. You know, he mused, I never thought things would end up this way. But you were always so focused on work. Isabelle needed someone who could keep up. I gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white with the effort it took to stay seated. He wasn't ashamed. He wasn't guilty. He was amused. For a moment, all I saw was red. I wanted to lunge across the table, wanted to make him feel just a fraction of the devastation I felt in that moment. But rage, unchecked, is reckless. And I had never been a reckless man. No, I was calculated. Precise. And this betrayal would be no different. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Not to call Isabelle. Not to demand answers from the woman who had shattered my world. Instead, I dialed a number I hadn't used in years. Danielle, I said, my voice calm, cold, controlled. I need a divorce. I'm done. 2 days later, I walked into the home Isabelle and I had built together, the weight of betrayal pressing heavy against my chest. She was in the kitchen, dressed in one of those elegant silk blouses she always wore when she wanted something. When she saw me, she smiled, but there was something behind it, hesitation, uncertainty. She knew. Alexandra, she greeted, voice too bright, too forced. You're home early? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I let the silence stretch, let her feel the weight of the moment. Then finally I spoke. We need to talk. The smile faltered. Her fingers tightened around the glass in her hand. A flicker of fear crossed her face. I know about you and Olivier. The color drained from her face. She took a step back, lips parting, mind scrambling for an excuse, a lie, anything to undo what had already been set in motion. What are you talking about? I let out a breath, controlled, deliberate. I heard everything, I said, voice steady. The phone call. Last night. Dinner at 6:30. Her hands trembled. She opened her mouth again, but no words came. She had been caught. There was nothing left to say. I watched as realization sank in, as she understood that the life she had known was slipping through her fingers. And then I delivered the final blow. I'm divorcing you, I said simply. And I'm taking everything. The silence that followed was deafening. For months, I meticulously orchestrated every step of the divorce. It wasn't just about ending our marriage, it was about making them both feel the weight of what they had done. Isabelle fought me at every turn, clinging desperately to the lifestyle I had built for us. But she had underestimated me. She had mistaken my silence for weakness, my grief for surrender. She was wrong. Every asset, every luxury, every advantage she thought she could walk away with, I stripped from her piece by piece. The house. Gone. The accounts? Frozen. The reputation she had so carefully cultivated? Shattered. And Olivier? I destroyed him. Not with anger. Not with violence. but with the same ruthless precision that had built my empire. I leveraged every connection, every resource. I exposed his indiscretions, turned his own investors against him. His empire crumbled beneath him, brick by agonizing brick. By the time I was finished, they were left with nothing. And me? I walked away with my head held high, my future intact, and the sweet, undeniable satisfaction of knowing that betrayal, no matter how carefully planned, always comes at a price. Olivier made one attempt to step in to reason with me, but I shut him down with a single, piercing glance. He had lost the right to intervene, to speak on Isabelle's behalf, to play any role in what came next. She had chosen him after all. Now they could face the fallout together, except there was nothing he could do to save her. Through it all, memories of the past haunted me. The laughter that once filled our home, the long walks hand in hand through the park, the whispered dreams of a future we were supposed to share. It was painful to acknowledge that those moments were now nothing more than echoes of a life I no longer recognized. What hurt the most wasn't just the betrayal itself. It was the arrogance, the assumption that she could get away with it. That she could deceive me, take me for a fool, and still hold on to the world I had built for us. But she had underestimated me. They both had. Betrayal of this magnitude left no room for sentimentality. My heart had hardened, and nothing would stop me from getting what I deserved. The day of the final hearing arrived, and I was ready. Isabelle, in a desperate attempt to salvage what she could, tried to negotiate at the last minute. She pleaded to keep the house, to maintain the extravagant lifestyle she had grown so accustomed to. In a moment of staggering audacity, she even begged for a second chance, as if love could be rekindled in the ashes of deceit. I met her tearful gaze with cold resolve. "No," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "You betrayed me. You betrayed us. And now you'll pay for it." The judge's gavel came down, sealing her fate. With a single decisive moment, everything Isabelle had clung to crumbled. The assets were divided, and I ensured she received as little as legally possible. The mansion she adored? What? The luxury she had flaunted? Gone. The art, the jewelry, the vacations. Every symbol of the life she had built through deception was stripped away. She had gambled with everything, and she had lost. The court order was swift, the assets transferred without delay. As I stepped out of that courtroom, there was no need for celebration, just a quiet, unshakable sense of victory. Isabelle had been defeated, but there was no joy in watching her unravel. No satisfaction in her tears. She was still the woman who had broken me, and no amount of suffering on her part could undo what she had done. But I wasn't finished. Isabelle's reckoning was complete, but Olivier's was just beginning. He had betrayed me in the most unforgivable way, and I had no intention of letting him walk away unscathed. At first, I considered confronting him directly, walking into his office demanding an explanation. But that would have been too easy. Too merciful. Olivier thrived in the world of business, manipulating deals and people alike, believing himself untouchable. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. I struck where it hurt most, his empire. One by one, I reached out to the partners he had hidden from me, the investors who had unknowingly put their trust in a man who thrived on deceit. Quietly, methodically, I dismantled his credibility. The whispers of his personal life, the exposure of his lies, the stain of his affair, all became ammunition in my calculated assault on his reputation. Deals he had been securing for months fell through, one after another. Investors backed out. Clients turned their backs. He felt the ground shift beneath him but had no idea where the attacks were coming from. Olivier called me during this time. More than once. First with empty threats. Then with desperate pleas. I let the calls ring, knowing he was unraveling, knowing he was drowning in the consequences of his own actions. The final blow came in the form of a devastating article, a brutal exposé detailing his personal and professional failings. The business world now saw him for who he truly was, and there was no salvaging the wreckage. His empire collapsed, his influence shattered beyond repair. He had taken my wife. He had tried to take my life, my future. And now he had nothing. In the months that followed, I began to rebuild. The pain of betrayal never fully disappeared, but it became manageable, a dull ache rather than an open wound. I found solace in quiet moments, in long walks through the city, in the simple pleasure of a morning coffee, in the rediscovery of a life I had once lost myself in. I reconnected with friends I had neglected, people who had stood by me without question. I poured myself into projects that ignited something within me, not just the ones that brought in wealth. And through it all, I reflected. On Isabelle. On Olivier. On the lessons their betrayal had carved into me. Trust, once broken, was never truly reparable. Love, once tainted, could never be the same. And strength, it wasn't about vengeance. It was about reclaiming control. There were fleeting moments when I almost pitied Isabelle. Perhaps even Olivier. She had thrown away a future she could have had. He had lost everything for a moment's indulgence. But pity was fleeting and the reality was undeniable. They had made their choices. I had made mine. I heard whispers of Olivier's struggles, his futile attempts to rebuild, his desperate grasp at a reputation that would never be restored. He was still fighting, still clinging to what remained of his shattered world. But I knew something he didn't. No matter how hard he tried, he would never regain what he had lost. Time moved forward and so did I. I was no longer the man who had walked into that boardroom, blind to the betrayal unfolding around him. But I was also not the broken man they had expected me to become. I had survived. I had rebuilt. And I had learned. One afternoon, as I sat in a quiet cafe with a book in hand, I realized something profound. Revenge had never truly been about inflicting pain. It had been about reclaiming my power, about taking back the life that had been stolen from me. Isabelle and Olivier were now nothing more than a closed chapter. The past. A lesson learned. As I looked ahead, I knew I was free. And the greatest revenge? It wasn't destruction. It wasn't even victory. It was living well. And in that, I had found peace.